In today's housing market, the word gentrification sparks heated debates. People feel pushed out of neighborhoods they've called home for decades, unable to afford rising prices all around them. But is there another side to this story that no one is talking about? What role does personal responsibility play in these situations? And could the choices we make, both financially and personally, be just as important as the external forces we blame? In this episode, we're diving into the tough realities of gentrification, homeownership, and accountability. If you're ready to hear some hard truths about taking control of your financial future in an ever-changing market, today's episode is the day. So let's dive in and really start to talk about the other side of the story. Let's go.
Welcome to the Financial Mirror. Where future success is reflected in our knowledge of fixing the one thing we can control, ourselves.
Welcome to the Financial Mirror, and thanks for joining me today as we continue to work to improve the one thing that we can control, ourselves. Here at the Financial Mirror, it is not about the numbers and spreadsheets alone, but about transforming and educating you on money so that you can make smarter financial decisions. If this is the first time you are joining in, don't forget to hit subscribe on YouTube to be notified of all the new episodes as they release. If you are on Rumble, don't forget to follow the channel and like the video. And on any podcast platform of your choice, don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. So today, gentrification. It is one of those words that will inevitably stir up some strong emotions. People hear it and they really often think about things like rising cost of living, whether it be rents or homes, displacing families that have lived there for decades, and kind of that first point, unaffordable homes. Like people just can't buy the homes that they once could. But what if we kind of looked at this through a different angle? And today is going to be particularly possibly a slightly controversial stance. But you know, I'm gonna kind of preface this with where it comes from. Where I'm coming from is the fact that if you as a person, and I'm just talking about you as a person, and as I say you, I'm actually in this case talking about myself. But if I talk about things and I blame things, I have now given those things more control of my life than I've got, right? Like if you blame someone for something, right, regardless of what it is, right? If you let me give you an example. You're at a crosswalk and you walk across the crosswalk and you get bumped. I'm not gonna say hit by a car, but you get bumped by a car. What's the first thing we learn? Like when we're crossing the street, you look both ways, right? So you get bumped by a car that didn't stop, right? You can blame that car, or you can say, you know what? I didn't look both ways. I should have looked both ways and I would have seen that car coming. And yes, they were about to run right through my crosswalk, but I wouldn't have got bumped because I looked both ways. All I'm talking about in this episode, and we're not talking about crosswalks, we're not talking about people walking across the street. What we're talking about is gentrification, and I want to look at it from the sense of controlling what we can control. I want to look at it from the sense of personal accountability, because most controversial conversations are focusing on this emotional sense where people are being priced out of their communities, right? That's really what a lot of people, they tug on the heartstrings and all of a sudden it becomes emotional. But what I want to talk about is, first off, just helping you kind of take another glance at it and say, you know what, let me control what I can control and let me change my situation. And that's where I want to talk today. So it's an unpopular stance. I got it, but I want to talk about personal responsibility, because at the end of the day, whether or not you are displaced can come down to financial decisions you've made or financial decisions that you will make. Right? Like that is what really comes down to it. If you are in a community where prices are soaring, if you're not making good financial decisions right now, you could fall victim of being priced out of your community, right? Like, and that's what I want to talk about today. I know you can't control people moving into a neighborhood. Nobody can. Nobody can control people moving into a neighborhood. And if a lot of people want to move into a neighborhood, you can't control that. That creates competition and pricing. And what does that competition do? Well, it increases the prices. You cannot control those things. So today, unpopular stance, I got it, but I want to talk about accountability. I'm not here to say gentrification isn't real. It's not what I'm not here to say that it doesn't displace people. Of course it does. Both of those things are true. But what if I also told you that you have more control over your situation than you might think, right? And today we're going to explore why some of us, if we'll just realize that we have control over our situation, that realization could allow for us to start to take that next step, start to become that homeowner that you probably at one point felt hopeless ever becoming, right? I want to talk about that today because that is where this episode came from. I kept hearing over and over again is, I've heard, well, I've lived here forever and now I can't afford it, right? And that's a hard statement. It is. It's tough. It's tough to hear. It's not fun to hear that you're being priced out of your community, that you're not able to buy a home that in a community that you've lived in forever. Like, I got it. It's not fun. It's not great. But the uncomfortable truth is that not planning for home ownership earlier is also a decision in itself, right? Like, there's a lot of things that you can control that got you to where you are today, and you have to take that as lessons learned, right? For good or for worse, those are lessons learned. So let's start to control how we can respond versus being fixated on the things we can't take into account and take into control of. So first off, let's start off with, for those that may not be as familiar with gentrification, like, what is it? So in simple terms, it is when wealthier people move into like lower income neighborhoods. Most of the time when we think about it, we think about people that are moving into cities. A lot of times that's what we're talking about is people are moving into cities, whether it be because, they want to get closer to work or they want to be closer to the life, that nightlife or whatever the life is for them. But a lot of times cities are also home to like lower income neighborhoods, right? So as a result of people moving into these, affluent people moving into these neighborhoods, it creates this like weird thing with housing prices, specifically housing prices, but everything, like all costs start to go up. So property values and rents rise, and this forces many that are possibly in those low-income neighborhoods, many long-time residents to have to move out because they just cannot afford to stay there. So why does it happen? Well, pretty straightforward. Supply and demand. Like, that is exactly the reason why it happens. A neighborhood becomes desirable, whether because of new businesses or, new homes or, improved safety or just wanting to be closer to work or family or whatever. There is a demand for people to move into that area. And because of that high demand, people are willing to pay more to live there, right? It's basic supply and demand here. And the market will respond to what people are willing to pay. If people are willing to pay, and I think about it from like I lived in Hawaii for just over 5 years, and you think about it from that sense, like people live there for decades, and and all of a sudden people are wanting to retire and move there. And this is like, people that have 40 plus years of working and have probably a decent amount of money, and they're walking in there, but they're competing against other people that have 40 plus years of working. And now we drive cost up. I got it. It's a real thing. It is a real thing. It does push cost up. Now let's think about this. Property values go up because the area became more desirable. It's not just out of nowhere. Like, prices just don't start increasing. Something happened that made this a desirable area. And then for places like Hawaii, it's just always been desirable. Like, it's just like people call it quote unquote paradise, right? So people are willing to move there, and people are bringing their money with them and increasing cost. So it's not out of nowhere. People move to these areas because there's something made them more desirable. Now, ask yourself this. If everyone wants to live in one area and the demand is, so that would mean the demand is high. What do you think happens to the prices? Yeah, they go up. Exactly. Prices rise. They rise drastically sometimes depending on the level of demand. So hopefully you kind of got that idea. This whole gentrification thing is not, it's not people wanting to be mean. It's not people wanting to push people out. Like that's not like they're like someone had a desire, in some cases a lot of people had a desire all at the same time, and they all move in and they bring their money with them in this competition, and there's only so many places to live, there's only so much land, and demand goes up and prices go up and families get moved out that can't afford to live there anymore. Now you hear it a lot. I've lived here for 20 years and now I'm getting priced out. And so that kind of brings me to my next question. Like what is in the past 20 years of you living there, and maybe you're just 20 years old. Let's use that. The past 20 years of you living there, has every decision financially been made to help get you out and or get a house or whatever the case is? Like financially, have you put every foot forward in the right direction to improve your ability to stay there? That's kind of that first question is, I've lived here for 20 years and now I can't afford to stay. And that's always my immediate question. So are you just now trying to become a homeowner? And if so, how important is it for you to stay in this community, right? Because that is always the question. Because I'm not going to say it's easy. And I know there's debt, there's financial hardships, there's other life situations that can get in the way. But the reality is, there's also a lot of personal responsibility. And I'm going to say the hard part first is if you've lived somewhere and you're not 20 years old, right? Like you're 40 or 50 years old and you've lived in that same community for 40 or 50 years and you're not owning a home yet. There's financial situations or financial decisions that could have been made over time that could help get you there, right? Like, so we have to then ask ourselves, what can I do now to better my chances of being able to stay in this community? And a lot of times what I hear, and man, I wish I could tell you that this would go away, and I just don't know if it will, but I'll hear people talk, when they talk about finances, it's always a procrastination effort. Well, I don't have enough money to save for a house right now, so I'll start that next year. I'm gonna get my next 3% raise, right? I'll do that next month. I'll start budgeting next month. I'll start putting money aside. I can't afford to put $1,000 a month aside. I can only afford to put 10. And I hear these things time after time, and I wish they would go away, because I'll be frank, if you were putting $10 away every single month, you would build the habit to the point where you would start to learn to put away $20 a month, and you would have built the habit, and you start to learn to put away $40 a month, and you'd find $50 a month, you'd find $100 a month. It is a habit and a muscle that must be built. So all that's to say is, first think about like all the decisions you've made in the last 20 years, in the last 30 years, in the last 40 years. Think about all the decisions you made that may have led to kind of now being in the situation you're in. So that's the first thing that I kind of like prefacing this. I kind of just wanted to sort of start this all off. Think about it from that lens as we kind of go forward, right? Because the next part I want to talk about is how you can take control of it, right? So this isn't a knock on all the decisions you've made. This isn't a knock on why you're where you are now, because where you are now is a great place to be, because you've learned and you've grown through all the lessons and decisions that you've made, right? The lessons you've learned and the decisions you've made. So what I want to talk about is, regardless of where you're at, regardless of what you're doing right now, how can you start to take control of your financial future? And thinking about it from the lens of gentrification, right? Like, I can't afford to buy a home. That's what I want to talk about, is how can you not get pushed out of a community, or potentially how can you put yourself in a position to where you can become a homeowner. You can become a homeowner, and you can become a homeowner in the community that you feel like you're being pushed out of. In order to do this, the first thing you have to understand is that it's a choice that requires planning and sacrifice. It does. And if you're serious about owning a home, if you're truly serious about owning a home, because that's who I'm talking to today. I'm talking to people that are saying, I can't buy a home. I can't do this. I can't do that. Like, what I want to talk about is the planning and sacrifice that it would take for you to become a homeowner. So if you're serious about owning a home, you need to make that a top priority. First and foremost, if you're out of debt and you are looking to buy a home, you need to make that your top priority. The market doesn't care about what you feel is fair. It really doesn't. It reflects what people are willing to pay, plain and simple. It does not care how you feel about being pushed out of a community. It does not care about how long you've lived there. It doesn't care that you're generations and generations of being someone from that city or whatever, county or whatever. It doesn't care. It really doesn't. If people are willing to pay more than you can pay, they will move in and take over that area. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. Like that is the way it is. It really is. And I hate to say it that way, but it's true. The market is not against you. It isn't. It is a reflection of what people are willing to pay. And the question is, what are you willing to do differently so that you can improve your chances of staying there? You got to ask yourself that. Are you serious about owning a home, or are you just hoping things are going to fall into place? Are you going to complain about it just long enough to where it annoys you, and then you start to do something about it? So what can you do? Like I said, the first thing that you can do to own a home in a market that is more expensive than you can currently afford, the first thing you can do is get serious about saving for a down payment. That is the first thing you can do. First thing you can do. And you are in control of that. You are in control of stop spending money in areas you're spending money and start saving money for a down payment. I know it's tough to save these days. The economy is expensive. Things are expensive. But if home ownership is important to you, you will find areas that you need to cut, and you'll make it happen. Cut expenses, pick up a side hustle, meaning make more money, make more extra income, whatever it takes. You will make that your first priority. You will get serious about saving for a down payment. You may not be able to buy the home of your dream right now, but starting with something small and more affordable is all about building that foundation, right? So it might sound simple. That probably sounds super simple, and it's not. In reality, you've got to learn to save aggressively. You've got to cut back on non-essentials, because remember, home ownership is the long game. It's not a sprint. That is the long game. So let's say that you're looking at homes that cost $400,000 just for giggles, right? But you can't afford that. All the homes in your area are $400,000, and you can't afford that. Well, you know how you can afford that? Save a bigger down payment. If you saved $100,000 and you're now looking at $400,000 homes with $100,000 down payment saved up, you're looking at a $300,000 mortgage instead, right? The point is, you control how much you're going to have to borrow. You control how much house you can afford, right? Because the down payment is the biggest component into how much house you can afford, much more than the interest rate, much more. Now, the interest rate is something that will influence how much you can afford. It will allow for you to buy more, potentially with a lower interest rate. But remember, the key component of this whole conversation is controlling what you can control, and what you cannot control is the interest rate. The interest rate is going to be the interest rate. So what can you control? Your down payment. Save more. What else can you control? The house you choose. Find affordable homes, right? Interest rates matter, but you can't control them. So what you control is your debt to income ratio, your savings, your financial discipline, your budgeting, all those things. Focus on those things. Those are the things you control. Interest rates will fluctuate. Right now they may be high, but that doesn't stop you from preparing to buy. So control what's in your power. Now, the truth, the next part is about kind of like how there's another option, and not the most popular option, but the second option is, outside of saving more money and buying what you can where you're at, the second option for home ownership is moving to more affordable areas. Look, I get it. No one wants to hear, hey, move away from a place that you've lived for years. Nobody wants to hear that. But if the housing market where you've lived, if it's already outpacing your income, if you're already kind of behind the eight ball on keeping up with everyone else around you, you've kind of already missed that, right? It might be in your best interest financially, personally, to explore other options, right? And maybe that doesn't mean moving to another state. Maybe that means moving outside of the city. Maybe that means moving further away from the city where costs may be cheaper, right? Moving to a more affordable area can actually be a blessing in disguise. Think about this. Sure, you may have a longer commute, but you could also have a lower mortgage. You could build equity faster and maybe even pay off your home sooner, right? Like there's added benefit to that. Because if you ask yourself, would you rather stay in a place where you'll never be able to buy, continue to rent and watch your rent increase, or would you like to move somewhere where homeownership is possible, even if it's not the most ideal place? Like, how would you answer that? Would you move? Would you move somewhere that you can't actually buy a home, or would you continue to rent in this place that you can't afford? Right? It is an option. It's not just about where you live now. I also, like, when you really think about that, it's about building a stable financial future. Sometimes that means moving to a more affordable market, and it may mean out of state. I don't know. I don't know what it means for you. I don't know where you live. I don't know what your options are. But if your current option is that there is an option to say, hey, I can move an hour. I can have a 1 hour commute, but I could get a home for half the price. Are you willing to drive that 1 hour commute every day? Are you willing to figure out other options that would allow for you to buy a home there? Think about it from the long term. The beauty of owning a home in a more affordable market is that you're investing in your future. You are investing in your future. Instead of paying rent and watching prices around you continue to climb, you're building wealth. You're down the line, the equity could help you sell that home that's paid off and upgrade to a better home in maybe an area that's more desirable for you and for your kids and your kids' kids and all those things. Like, you can start to build that just with the decisions you make now. So you're probably thinking, but I can't afford to move. There's no way I'll ever be able to save up enough money to move. I get it, but hear me out. I get it. There's a lot in life that you can't control. You can't control. You can kind of control wages, right? Like, you can kind of control how much money you make. Like, you can market yourself to make more money. You could pick up new skills to make more money. Like, you can do those things. Rent increases, you can't exactly control that. Like, the market's going to drive that. Economic downturns, you can't really control that. But what you can control is your spending and your savings and the choices you make with your money. Those are things you can control. So if complaining about the market, complaining about your living situation, complaining about not being able to afford a home, you can't really do that if you're not making sacrifices and financial moves that will help change anything, right? Like, complaining will do nothing. Like, there's zero action that comes out of complaining. But if you can start taking some of those small baby steps, some of those small actions, you could improve where you're at. And so at the end of the day, the choice is yours. You can either keep waiting for the market to adjust to you, your wages to adjust in the market. You complain long enough that people stop moving to your neighborhood and maybe demand slows down and that brings prices down, all those things. But there's also this other thing you can do, and it's hard, but it's possible. You can start looking at overcoming that thing called gentrification. You can start to look at ways that you can overcome that. There's a few studies out there that talk about how people that were gentrified, or whatever word buzz lingo we're throwing out, people that moved away or pushed out, if we want to call it that, some chose to move, right? Like they said, you know what, I'm going to get ahead of the curve before everyone gets this influx and they're all priced out and we all move together. I'm going to get ahead of the curve, and they just moved. There's studies out there that show that those people are better off financially than they were at their other spot. And they probably are homeowners now, right? Probably homeowners. So that thing that they complained about, I'll never buy a home, I'll never be a homeowner. They moved to an area that they could actually afford based off of their income, and they could be homeowners. They could afford things. They're better off financially than they were back in that rental condo apartment thing, right? So I'm not saying gentrification isn't real. It is. But how do you adapt to it? How do you control what you can control? How do you take responsibility for the things that you should be responsible for and not let it consume your life, not let it slow you down? Keeps taking steps in the right direction so that you can be a homeowner. I don't care how expensive your market is. If you can't afford that market, you've got to get to another market. You've got to get to somewhere that you can afford. You've got to build a foundation that allows for you to start taking steps in a positive direction. So just to recap, I'm telling you, I understand it's a controversial stance. I got it. Gentrification is real. It is displacing people. I'm not saying that it isn't. But I don't like to sit around and blame and complain and not talk about like doing things about it. So I wanted to talk about like the whole personal accountability, personal responsibility for your own financial future, because you have more control than you think. You have more control than you think. So take that first step, take responsibility and start to control your financial future, whether it's saving for that down payment, whether it's moving to a more affordable area or, making sacrifices today so that you can have a more stable tomorrow. Like all of those things are in your hands. The power of controlling those things are in your hands. And I encourage you, I challenge you, take a hard look at and ask yourself, am I doing everything I can to become a homeowner? And if not, what changes can you make starting today? What are those small changes you can make starting today? Because this isn't about blame. It's about empowerment, right? Like it's not about blaming you for where you're at right now. It's not about blaming people for wanting to come to this desirable area that you live in. It's not about that. There's a demand there and people are willing to pay more for it. But it's about empowering you to take control of your situation, because the sooner you take control, the sooner you can build a more secure financial future. And it all starts with action today. It all starts with action today. So I challenge you. I encourage you. Go take a look at yourself. Go take a look at what can I do to better my life, better my position, and better my ability to be a homeowner, to create a more stable financial future for me and my family. So hopefully you got something out of this episode. Like I said, it's not an episode that many people love to hear. It's a different stance than many will take. But I really I had this aha moment where I just like, you know what, I need to talk about this with people that feel burdened. They feel like they'll use those terms. I'll never own a home. I can't buy a home in today's market. I can't do this. You can. You really, really can. I'm telling you can. It just might not look the way that you envisioned. Like you may not be able to, for that picture perfect home in this perfect neighborhood in this perfect street corner, and like it may not look like that. It may not, but that's okay, because that first step is all it's going to take for you to propel yourself and push yourself to where you need to be to build a more stable financial future to get to where you want to go. So hopefully you got something out of this episode. And if this kind of all hit home and you're like, you know what, I'm ready to take control of the finances. I'm ready to get a plan around that. I'm ready to build that. I encourage you, head over to thefinancialmirror.org, hit book now, schedule a free consultation with me. We'll sit down and we'll just take a look and see how can we get you on that path to home ownership? How can we start to think about where are you spending too much and where can we cut? How can we build you a path to where you're saving money and give you an estimate on when you're going to be able to buy your first home, right? Like let's start to plan that stuff out, because everything, a goal without a plan is a wish, right? Like you're just wishing that would happen. So let's put a plan together. I truly appreciate everyone tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share this episode. If you're hearing this from others, please share this episode out with them. Get this message out, because I want to empower people to buy a home. I want to empower people to be homeowners. I want to empower people to know that they can overcome whatever financial situation they're in. It just takes effort and it just takes drive and initiative to get it done. So thank you for tuning in. Hope you got something out of the episode. Till next week, continue improving the one thing you can control, yourself. Peace.
Well, that wraps up today's Financial Mirror. Join us next week as we continue to work on ourselves. change our mentality, and to commit to achieving the success we always envisioned. Regardless of your platform, help us grow as a community. Please like, subscribe, and share with the people in your lives.